In the hot seat.
Yeah, thanks.
And we have Lisa Waananen. Okay, from communication.
Yeah,
Thank you
hi
for
everyone.
joining us.
Thanks for sticking around on this Friday and listening to this. So, this was kind of a joke title that I put on this because I was typing my thing at the park when I was with my kids, and then Cliff told me it was fine. So, we are talking about a party, but really this is about the idea of using collaborative evaluation as a way of learning assessment. So that would be like the title. So ultimately, this is kind of the end result. I teach a number of visual communication classes for our college that usually incorporate a variety of majors. One challenge with this is they come in with really diverse backgrounds to that class. Some of them are majors, some of them are minors, some of them have been doing photography for 10 years, some of them are terrified of this idea and have never touched a camera. So that's kind of the overall goal. And what we do by the end is put on a photo contest. So most of these are not my students' photos. They're the ones that they selected, and then we do display them in our hallway. You can't see it here, but it's across from a very slow elevator, so a lot of people stand there admiring them. And so we call this the WSU Student Photo Contest, which is not a creative name, but it works. And the course is Introduction to Photojournalism. It's the only dedicated photojournalism class that we have. There's another photography class that's very similar through the art department, and we've collaborated, and a lot of students take both. So this has also opened up a really good collaboration between those classes. Starting after midterms, we work on this just a little bit every class period through the end of week 15 and really finals week. And students do the whole thing themselves. They set up the photo contest. I give them sort of what students had done previously, and then they decide on all the contest rules. They solicit the submissions. They're responsible for sort of advertising it. We have one day where we just put flyers around campus. They're probably still around because we don't go take them down. And then in the last 3 weeks of the semester, they evaluate the submissions, we celebrate the winners, and they do write individual judging reports, which is what is a major component of their grade, because while I love group work, I do not love grading group work as a slightly scarred group work student myself. So they still get to, and also sometimes you get different opinions, and this is where they can still advocate for their own. But in class, we have to agree. So ultimately for the party, we have like snacks, we have prizes that we give out, we have invitations, and we send these to faculty and staff in our college, also other supportive faculty like in art. And we also invite the staff from my college who really love this because they don't interact with our students all that much, like our office staff, and they'll come for half an hour to this party. And the students present the winners. Many of the students who submitted photos, even if they're not in our class, are there, and it is meant to be like a party. And we do this during the end of week 15. All this started though at a very different time, which was back in January 2020 when we got this course approved, and we were super excited. We all know what happened next, which was not that the course did launch in fall of 2020. But it was not the fun experiential learning course that I had imagined and put in the syllabus and gotten approved through Faculty Senate. It was instead a lot of Zoom time. And so initially I kind of just thought like, we'll do this course the same as our other classes. At the end, we'll have an exam that'll test, vocabulary, history, application of composition principles and photos. And then we'll also do a photo project where they're applying those to something that matters. That's what I assumed. And of course that didn't work. I didn't want to do an exam. This was kind of before AI, but if you all remember, there was concerns about students cheating on exams in early COVID times. So we weren't really sure what to do about that. And definitely in 2020, I was not going to send them out into public places to take photos. There was just a lot of concern about their safety or other people's safety. A lot of photojournalism was focused on human subjects, and asking them to be in close proximity with other people at that time was not something I could demand. So we didn't do that at all. Instead, we had a final project, which was an analysis project where they all had to identify examples of professional work from that year. It was a super interesting year for photojournalism. Again, this is probably not reviving a lot of super positive memories for people, but there were really fascinating photos trying to represent COVID, being a health thing, not a lot of access. There were really interesting portraits done during that time through windows, interesting things. Then there's also the Black Lives Matter movement, tons of protest photography, including some interesting ethics. There were fascinating sports photos of like, a home run, but nobody's in the stands. It was an interesting year for photography. So we were able to do this where they nominated professional work, we chose a winner. We actually told the photographers, and a lot of them were really touched because they had kind of been working in isolation, and to know that students had noticed their work and nominated it, a lot of them were just, working in the state and thought that was really cool. A lot of you have probably seen sort of the Bloom's taxonomy way of doing this. And the more I thought about it, I thought I'm always trying to get them, to do sort of the applying stuff, understanding it, remembering it. And then we often are trying to get them to like take photos. And at least in our program, we're often missing like that evaluation layer, even though as faculty, we spend like a huge amount of our time doing that kind of stuff. We're evaluating student work, we're participating in peer review. I do a lot of my service is judging contests for professional groups, which I really love to do. And so I thought, let's just have the students do that more regularly. So once we were all back together, we said, all right, we're going to do similar thing, but we're going to do student work because that'll keep it really immediate for you. And so sort of our structure through the semester, I tell them about it in week 1, but we don't really start it till halfway through. And then we kind of build it in so that we're still doing other coursework at that time. It's not our entire focus, but we can kind of work toward the end, having our party. Here's some of the posters they've made, mostly in Canva to promote it. So this is something they do 1 week during class. They have to also decide on the categories, which is a huge debate. That is a really hard thing for them to decide. They also spend a lot of time talking about the rules. All of these are actually like photos, like the cameras are photos they took. So in that class, we actually spent the day where they did a photo shoot of promotional photos to use on their posters. So they took pictures of each other doing like cool poses with cameras and stuff. They didn't end up using those ones. And then they have to talk about the rules and evaluation criteria. So some questions they talk about are like, what amount of editing or digital manipulation is allowed? This is a big question in photojournalism. Typically you can't do big manipulations, but like, can you change the exposure a little bit? Can you make those colors of the Palouse Hills look a little greener? Where do you draw the line? How do you account for technical excellence as well as originality and effort? Some students decide that they're really on the side of effort. If it took a lot of work to take that picture, they judge it better. And other people are like, I don't really care how much work it took. It has to just look perfect. And then they also end up talking about, even though I don't prompt them, they'll end up talking about things like fairness. Like they know that some students have more money to buy nice cameras than others, right? Are you rewarding the student who's got the money to invest in gear? Well, we don't always know their backstories when we're judging the contest anonymously, but they end up talking about that kind of stuff. Or some students get better opportunities for travel abroad or internships or other things where they get to photograph more interesting subjects just because of their own experiences. So that leads to some really cool conversations between them. And I mostly just get to sit back and listen, which also allows me to assess what they are understanding well or not. And they do a lot of peer reinforcement as well. So here's a picture of them doing some judging last semester in the fall. I always do printouts because they actually love doing this in person, moving things around the room and stacking things and sorting them. We also look at big versions on our screen in there. And this is toward the end of the round. So they had limited, these were sort of the finalists in a couple categories. We usually start out with about 50 to 70 submissions has been standard when we've done this. And this was a lull in the process when they were trying to decide on their value system on a couple of these. They also talk about things like, is it fair for the same photographer to win multiple times? And I say, well, did you consider it when you made the rules? If not, you got to stick with the rules you set up. And they will spend hours on this. Each semester progressively, that has been the one piece of feedback I've gotten. And we're up to, I think, 6 hours for judging. And they want more and more classroom time to do that, which is actually pretty cool. And you hear them reinforcing for each other too, like the vocabulary we've been doing all semester. They'll be like, well, I like this one because it really has that, what's that moment thing we talked about? Somebody else will be like, the decisive moment, and they're kind of helping each other talk that through. And then they have to take those conversations and put them into the presentation that they give at the party, which is only about 10 minutes long, but they all take part in it. So why have a party? I think this would work in a lot of other contexts. The party is really just a way to celebrate the end result. But judging is really hard. They get really into it. And I think we all know this, right? Judging things, feeling like you made the right choice is a difficult thing. And they take that very seriously. I'm always amazed that I have students who half these students who are barely paying attention when I lecture, but you get them into this and they you know, they're super into it. It does even the playing field in my class between students who are coming in with those different levels of experience. They can all be proficient at championing someone else's work. They don't have to take the best photo, but they can still eloquently describe why they prefer one, how they think it applies to the judging criteria. And they also get to practice their presentation skills, which I've generally found lacking in recent years. I don't know about all of you. I feel like they used to come in with better presentation skills. Maybe we're just seeing that like COVID after effect. I don't know, but that seems like a need. And I also really like the idea of practicing how to celebrate other people's good work. I don't feel like I got any practice in that, like in undergrad. And it's kind of a hard thing, actually, right? To know the right thing to say and how to give credit to somebody else for doing something really well. But we end up doing a lot of it. And I think they usually find that to be a really uplifting experience as well, especially to do this during week 15 when they're focused on my grades, my assignments, studying for my exams, to take an hour where instead saying, look at these amazing photos. And I'm just going to show you some of them. These are from different contests. These are from different categories too. But like, our students are doing really cool work, and these are usually submitted with captions, so we know something about why they took the photos. Some of them are, you know, staged, some of them are candid. We get a ton of submissions for like landscape and nature, which makes sense. That's a huge interest around here. Some of them are on film, like this one was taken on film. And the students will just talk about this endlessly. And then they have to summarize their comments, so they get to say basically about 2 sentences about why they picked the one they did, knowing the students whose photos they selected and the students whose photos they didn't select could be in the audience in our classroom that day. And they take that very seriously. So there's a few more. I always pick, actually, oh, there's one last, one last example I'll show you. I always add a few of my own choices at the end because I don't interfere on their judging at all. But there's always a few where I'm like, you didn't pick that one. That's a pretty cool photo. Actually, this one's a really cool one. Technically, this one I wanted to blow up like as big as the wall. It's super cool. This one too. These spider ones, this was a cool contest one. We had 2 amazing spider photos in the same contest, and neither of them won because half my class is cowards who refuse to look at them. I think spiders are super cool, and they were just like, no, can't handle it. And I was like, fine, I'm putting them in the presentation anyway. So, but we can go back to that. We don't just linger on the spiders for people. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Okay, we have